X-Files return in 2 weeks' time. If you can't wait that long, the stars and the show's creator, Chris Carter, take you inside the X-Files on Wednesday night here on BBC One at 11:35.
I made this.
And for a closer inspection of the case, log on to the X-Files website at www.beeb.com.
So now it's time to play a brand new game called Name That Barcode. Anyone who regularly visits our modern supermarkets will know the barcode is an ingenious device for identifying the individual price of a product. The item is picked up by the cashier, who simply runs it past an electronic reader 3 or 4 times before calling out, "How much is this?" Now, teams, here's the first one. Thick black, thin white, thin white and thick black.
I know this one, I'm not sure how. It's Lillettes with wings.
You'll see things differently on BBC Radio 4.
Carol Smiley, Ian Jury and Richard Whiteley are the guests of McCoist and MacAulay tonight here on BBC One, right after Match of the Day in 20 minutes. The news and sport first on BBC One with Michael Berg and Helen Robertson.
The UN Security Council is meeting tonight in emergency session over Iraq's decision to stop cooperating with arms inspectors. Britain's called it totally unacceptable. A Catholic man's been murdered in Belfast. It could have been a new sectarian attack. And a woman's drowned in a swollen river as heavy rain threatens yet more floods. Good evening. The United Nations Security Council began an emergency meeting a short while ago over a new crisis with arms inspections in Iraq. Baghdad has said it's suspending all cooperation with the United Nations Arms Inspection Team, UNSCOM, until the Security Council lifts the embargo on trade with Iraq. It wants the head of UNSCOM, Richard Butler, removed and the team purged of what it called American spies. From Baghdad, Richard Downs reports.
The Iraqi newsreader delivered the statement in the customary deadpan manner, but the content this time was explosive. Iraq is cutting off all dealings with UNSCOM. The weapons inspectors who were checking new sites have left long ago, and now the monitors who checked previously inspected sites will be prevented from doing their job. The UN will effectively have no eyes or ears in Iraq. In New York, the Iraqi representative at the United Nations explained some of the reasoning behind the surprise decision.
That's an action that has come out of frustration, and that we have not seen any progress on our cause in the Security Council, and we want the Council to look in fairness and in justice into the issues that relate to the Iraqi sanctions.
UN Secretary General Kofi Annan was surprised by the announcement.
In your shoes, I will press too. We need to get the facts faced.
The Iraqi leadership has also demanded the sacking of Richard Butler, the Australian who heads the UNSCOM mission. The only word of caution in their statement was a renewal of the promise that they would not interfere with the work of the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is monitoring Iraq's compliance with UN resolutions on nuclear weapons. This statement is yet another escalation in Iraq's long fight with the UN and more particularly the United States. The Iraqi reasoning is clear. They believe that there is no appetite for a new international confrontation, and they think that countries both inside and outside the alliance are much more sympathetic to their cause. Richard Downs, BBC News, Baghdad.
A man who was murdered in North Belfast last night is believed to have been the victim of a sectarian killing. He was a Catholic in his mid-30s who is said to have had no connection with any paramilitary or criminal group.
The security forces were today examining the scene of the shooting in North Belfast, trying to find clues that will help them track down what looks like a sectarian murder gang. Brian Service, a Catholic in his mid-30s, was walking home from a relative's house shortly after midnight last night when he was attacked. He was shot twice in the head and 3 times in the back. Local people described Mr. Service as an ordinary working man with no paramilitary or criminal connections.
Everything points to the fact that this
appears to be reminiscent of sectarian attacks in the past in North Belfast. If that is the situation, it is quite appalling and something that makes myself and other members of the community very, very fearful indeed.
Sinn Féin today condemned the failure to meet a deadline contained in the Good Friday Agreement for progress on setting up new cross-border bodies. At a series of protests beside the Irish border, Republicans accused unionists of operating a go-slow policy on the peace process. But unionists continue to insist that it's up to the IRA to break the deadlock by starting to destroy some of its guns. Mark Devonport, BBC News, Belfast.
Large areas of Wales and southwest England are still underwater after another day of heavy rain. In Devon, a 60-year-old woman died after falling from a footbridge into a river swollen by floodwaters near Oakhampton. And in the Severn Valley, nearly 40 flood warnings are still in force. Water levels have begun falling, but forecasters are predicting more rain to come.
The floods have claimed another life. A 60-year-old woman walking with friends over this bridge at Epsom in Devon drowned after falling into the swollen River Loo. Her body was recovered this afternoon. On the Severn today, the worst of the flooding was at Bewdley, where the river rose to a height of 5 metres. Emergency services trying to keep the town clear faced a new problem: sightseers. They urged the public to stay away until the floods subside. Among the visitors, the minister responsible for flood control, who said he was satisfied recommendations drawn up after the heavy floods last Easter had been followed.
It does seem to me that those lessons have been learned, are being learned. There's still improvements we want to make, incidentally, but nevertheless I think it's certainly a much better situation in terms of dealing with these floods than what happened at Easter.
In Bewdley this evening, several families are preparing to spend a second night in emergency accommodation. The Environment Agency says river levels on the Severn and Wye are now stable or falling in most areas, though they could rise again if, as expected, there's further heavy rain. Daniel Bircher, BBC News, Bewdley.
HMS Sheffield is to deliver humanitarian aid to the people of Honduras in the aftermath of Hurricane Mitch. A state of emergency has been declared in Honduras and in neighbouring Nicaragua. Landslides in the Honduran capital swept houses and roads into a river already swollen by floodwaters. 50 people died and tens of thousands are homeless. While the winds have now dropped, much of the country is under several feet of water. Here a man's been remanded in custody, charged with robbing the former Welsh Secretary Ron Davies of his car and its contents. Donald Fearon, who's 38 and unemployed, will appear in court again in just over 2 weeks' time. Mr Davies resigned as Welsh Secretary on Tuesday after admitting to what he called an error of judgment.
The defendant was brought to court an hour before the hearing was due to begin. He's been in custody since his arrest on Thursday. The identity of the man he's alleged to have robbed meant there was a high degree of interest in the case. His appearance before the court was delayed while his lawyer made a legal application to the stipendiary magistrate behind closed doors. Mr Fearon, unemployed and without a fixed address, sat in the dock throughout the 20-minute hearing. He spoke only briefly to confirm his name and date of birth and to answer some questions from the bench. The defendant was formally charged that on October the 26th he stole a Ford Granada car from the MP Ron Davies, and by doing so made Mr Davies fear he would be subjected to force. No application for bail was made, and the defendant was remanded in custody to appear in this court again on November the 16th. The police investigation is continuing into the alleged incident involving the MP, said to have started on Clapham Common, not far from Mr Davies's London home. Mr Davies's constituency has expressed total support. A senior Welsh party figure has warned Tony Blair not to impose a new leader in Wales to replace him. Small shreds of comfort for Ron Davies in an otherwise turbulent week. Chris West, BBC News.
The prison service has admitted that a second prisoner has been released by mistake from Barley Jail in Glasgow. The 49-year-old man was missing for 8 days before anyone noticed, and he's still not been found. Another prisoner facing a murder charge has also been freed in error. Hundreds of thousands of Israelis have gathered in Tel Aviv to mark the 3rd anniversary of the assassination of the former Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and to call for peace. The rally in the square where Mr Rabin was shot comes a week after the signing of the Y peace agreement in the United States. The wife of the former Chilean dictator Augusto Pinochet said she hopes she and her husband will be able to return home to South America soon. Lucia Pinochet told a news conference in London of her anguish at his arrest, but she didn't comment on proceedings to have him extradited to Spain. Police have launched a double murder inquiry after an elderly couple were killed at their home at Bispam near Blackpool. The bodies of Joan and Eric Boardman, both in their 70s, were discovered yesterday by one of their daughters. Police say there was no obvious motive for the attack.
The bodies of Eric and Joan Boardman were discovered by one of their daughters. Mr. Boardman was lying in the hallway, his body trapped beneath an overturned wardrobe. He had injuries to his face and head. Mrs. Boardman's body was found in the living room. It's still not clear how she died, although there were signs of injury to her neck. The inquiry is being run from an incident room where police revealed that a makeshift weapon had been found near the bodies, a kosh made out of batteries strapped together with tape. Detectives are still trying to discover how the murderer got into Mr. and Mrs. Boardman's house.
I can't say at the present time that the house has not been broken into, but I'm looking much more keenly at the possibility that somebody may have been admitted to the house, either by Joan or by Eric. That could be a stranger calling at the door on some sort of pretext, or it could be somebody who's known to them, who they've unwittingly allowed into the house, not suspecting any danger.
It's still not known if anything was taken from the house. Among their neighbours, Mr. and Mrs. Boardman were known as a kind, friendly couple. The police are appealing for help from anyone who might help them discover why a well-liked elderly couple were murdered in their own home. Kevin Baquet, BBC News, Blackpool.
A security guard has been killed at Coventry City's football ground. He was apparently run over by the bus carrying the Arsenal team. The accident happened as the coach was arriving at Highfield Road for this afternoon's Premier League match between the two sides.
The security guard was trying to direct the Arsenal coach into Coventry City's Highfield Road ground just before 2 o'clock. He was crushed as the vehicle was reversing. The whole Arsenal team was on board. Eyewitnesses said no one realised initially how serious the accident was.
The football players went down the bus and were looking on the ground behind, and everybody understood when there was an accident.
As paramedics frantically tried to help the injured man, the players were led away, unaware until after the match that the steward had died from his injuries. Friends described him as a dedicated Coventry supporter who loved his job at the ground.
The whole club is hurting just now. Everybody at the club is hurting. It's been a huge blow, but we can only think about his family, and we'll be there for his family, anything they need, because he was always there for us. So we'll be there for his family.
The Arsenal coach is being kept in Coventry as police investigate the accident. Another vehicle was brought to the stadium to take the players back to London. Bernadette Keogh, BBC News.
A New York property developer has given Paula Jones $1 million to persuade her to drop her sexual harassment claim against President Clinton. Abe Hirschfield handed Paula Jones the cheque at a news conference earlier today. He said the cheque can't be used until Miss Jones reaches a final agreement with the president's lawyers to drop her lawsuit. John Glenn, the world's oldest astronaut, has been talking from the Space Shuttle Discovery to school children back on Earth about the problems of eating breakfast in zero gravity. The 77-year-old American senator said he was enjoying being in space more this time than during his last mission 36 years ago.
The astronauts were woken in Spanish this morning, a specially requested song for Pedro Duque, the Spanish astronaut. The crew is still getting used to space. At first, lack of gravity caused their faces to swell as the blood went to their heads.
Yes, I'm still a little round-faced here today, and that comes from the fluid body shift that occurs, and that's something, as I understand, that goes away over a couple of days there, and you get back to normal again.
During the moment of launch, newly released pictures show the crew's bone-shaking reaction. In an interview with school children today, Glenn, in the centre, was asked if he'd felt more nervous the first time round, 36 years ago.
We didn't know much about space flight back in those days. We're sort of feeling our way and finding out what would happen to the human body in space, and so I think I was a little more nervous the first time.
Today, NASA is investigating a problem with the water. It tastes odd. It's thought iodine added to purify it is not being removed properly. And it's not just water Glenn's having trouble with. He got some of his breakfast on his glasses.
I guess with old folks, you normally think it goes down on an old man's necktie, but on this one it wound up on my glasses, and so you have to think of things like that.
This is the 92nd shuttle flight, but John Glenn's presence has recaptured the glamour and the glory of spaceflight. For NASA, battling with declining budgets, it's been a godsend. James Wilkinson, BBC News, at the Kennedy Space Centre.
Now, with news of a defeat for Great Britain in the first Rugby League test against New Zealand and the rest of today's sport, here's Helen Rollison.
Thank you, Michael. It's been a disappointing start to the international season for Great Britain after they lost the first game of a 3-test series against New Zealand. The home side fought back from 12-2 down at the McAulay Stadium to get on level terms at one stage, but the Kiwis won by 22 points to 16.
When the half-time hooter sounded, New Zealand were just 6-2 up, but as most schoolboys know, play continues until the referee blows his whistle, and Joe Waggoner's quick thinking, helped by a lapse in British concentration, enabled the visitors to double their points on the way to the dressing room. But in a sustained period of pressure from Great Britain after the break, the scores were levelled. First, Kieran Cunningham presented Keith Senior with just enough space to squeeze over for the first home try. Then, 4 minutes later, a similar move saw the ball again travelling towards Senior on the wing. But Paul Newlove had ideas of his own, his sleight of hand enough to create the opening for another 4 points. The Kiwis were rocking and for 10 minutes looked vulnerable, but they re-established control when Robbie Paul fed brother Henry, who delivered the perfect pass for Stacey Jones to drive over the line with pace and power. And New Zealand went further ahead when Stephen Kearney released the ball with precision timing to give Robbie Paul a simple score, which stretched the lead far enough so that Jason Robinson's late try changed the score but not the result. Steve McCormack, BBC News.
In the FA Carling Premiership, a waterlogged pitch at Stamford Bridge stopped leaders Aston Villa from playing Chelsea. That meant that second-placed Manchester United had the chance to close the gap at the top. That game against Everton and the Coventry-Arsenal match and Leicester-Liverpool are on Match of the Day straight after this programme. If you don't want to know the scores, look away now. Meanwhile, Ian Wright scored 2 goals in an excellent second-half performance by West Ham as they beat 10-man Newcastle 3-0. All the other Premiership matches today were drawn. It was 2 goals each for Derby and Leeds. Wimbledon drew 1-1 at home to Blackburn, and Southampton gained a valuable point away at Sheffield Wednesday. In the Scottish Premier Division, Rangers' game against Dundee United is featured on Sports Scene after this programme. Again, if you don't want to know the result, look away now. In Kilmarnock's home game